One of the most fascinating teams in college football in 2024 has been the BYU Cougars. Nationally, it still doesn't seem like they're getting that much respect, as they are currently undefeated and have a good chance at winning the Big 12 Conference and going to the college football playoff. This is pretty good for a team that many thought would finish near the bottom of the conference, has a quarterback that nobody really knows about, and is not filled with star talent like a lot of the rest of the top 10 teams. BYU is tough each and every year, and in today's video, I want to spotlight their rise this season. How did BYU go from a team projected to finish near the bottom of the Big 12 with a bunch of nobodies to a team that could be in the college football playoff here in a month and a half or so? Well, today we're going to talk about that, how they became 8-0, and also how they got to this point. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the impossible rise of BYU football. We are now well into the 2024 college football season, and if you're anything like me, I've been going to plenty of football games and lots of tailgates. All that time in the sun and moving around definitely has me sweaty and not smelling the greatest, and that is where the sponsor of today's video, Mando, comes into play. Mando was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's a high-performance, whole-body deodorant that you can apply literally everywhere. What's actually really interesting is that Mando is clinically proven to control odors better than a shower with soap alone. For example, 12 hours after a shower, a man's normal odor level is a 5 out of 10. With Mando, on the other hand, it is literally a 0. What's even better is they have some awesome scents, as they have 4 signature blends that include Bourbon Leather, Clover Woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. Personally, I've been using the Bourbon Leather body wash, and that is absolutely awesome. And the Mount Fuji deodorant smells so good that it has me totally confident when I walk out the door each morning. Mando is also great because it doesn't stain your clothes, it's made with skin-safe ingredients, and unlike most traditional deodorants, it's more of a pre-odorant, so it's working ahead of time. Luckily for you, Mando has made you a special offer because you watch this channel. The starter pack is perfect for new customers, as it comes with a full-size stick deodorant, a cream deodorant tube or a spray deodorant, and 2 free products like wipes or a mini body wash. And how do you do that? Well, you use the code that Mando gave me, which is SCOTTF, SCOTTF. If you want to smell good at your next tailgate, game, or any sort of event, be sure to get Mando products using my code, and you can smell like me. Thanks again to Mando for sponsoring today's video. BYU is definitely a very interesting program, as they've had many good moments and have had some really good players, especially at the quarterback position. BYU is also very unique, as it is sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was recently on their campus a couple weeks ago, and they definitely do a really good job of keeping that place beautiful, and the stadium is really awesome. I didn't get a chance to go to the game, but BYU's campus was awesome, and I can see why they have such a great fan base. Overall, BYU has been really solid in its history, and it really got good under head coach Lavelle Edwards. He's a Hall of Fame coach and one of the best coaches in college football history, as he won 10 plus games 10 different times while at BYU, and even had a perfect 13-0 record in 1984, where they would finish the season ranked number 1 in the country. After Lavelle Edwards was gone, they had the Gary Crowton era, and he ended up going 12-2 in his first year in 2001, but after that would miss a bowl game in 3 straight years. In 2005, they brought in Bronco Mendenhall, who immediately turned things around, as he won over 10 games in 4 of his first 5 years, and went to bowl games in all 6 of his years. That's just speaking about the Mountain West. In 2011, they'd end up becoming an independent, and Mendenhall would go 10-3 in 2011, before they'd win over 8 games the next 4 years. Mendenhall would then leave to go to Virginia, and Kalani Sitake would take over as the head man in 2016. So far, Sitake has had a very interesting tenure. He went 9-4 in their first year in 2016, but would miss a bowl game for the first time in forever for BYU in 2017. He then would have back-to-back 7-6 seasons in 2018 and 19, before in 2020 he found a hidden gem in Zach Wilson, who led them to an 11-1 record, and at one point they were ranked as high as number 11 in the country with a bowl victory. In 2021 and 2022, they had another future NFL quarterback in Jaron Hall, and he would help them go to a 10-3 record in 2021, and then this past season, Sitake and the Cougars would go 5-7, with a 2-7 mark in the Big 12. This was huge for BYU, as they were now getting pushed into the Group of 4 mix, with an opportunity to build their program even more. Their basketball program has also gotten a lot better, and BYU as a whole is definitely on the up. But as I said, their first year in the Big 12 did not exactly go according to plan, as they did not end up making a bowl game and the team just really struggled. Transfer quarterback Keaton Slovis just really couldn't get anything going, and the team just really struggled with adversity. The Cougar offense could not convert any third downs, the defense didn't get a lot of stops, they struggled with injuries, they had no pass rush, and their offense was just not very good. BYU still though was 5-2 at one point and had 5 chances to get one more win to go bowling, but would finish the year on an 0-5 mark. Sadly, they weren't that competitive as 2 of their 7 losses came by 7 points or fewer, and they could just never seem to pull out of a nosedive. BYU was 0-6 last year when turning the ball over multiple times, and 5-1 when it didn't. Keaton Slovis just really wasn't all that good, as he failed to get over 200 yards through the air in 6 of the last 7 games for the Cougs, and he also just wasn't all that mobile. Going into 2024, they would have to figure out the quarterback position, and everyone was looking towards another transfer, Gary Bohannon. Bohannon had been around college football for quite some time, as he spent time at both Baylor and USF before transferring to BYU for his final year. He was another one of those COVID dudes who could use his leg and had a decent enough arm, but still was ranked near the bottom of the Big 12. Personally, I had him ranked as the last quarterback in the Big 12, and there was really no reason to give him any sort of hype. But what is really interesting is he wasn't even the starting quarterback for them. That belonged to Jake Retzlaff. He was not a big deal coming out of high school, as he eventually went to Riverside Community College in California, and while he was the number 2 JUCO quarterback in the class of 2023, nobody was really talking about the guy. Retzlaff ended up putting up big numbers while he was at JUCO though, as he threw for 4,600 yards and 44 touchdowns, and got a little bit of time playing last year for BYU. Still though, he would end up taking over, but despite some optimism from the BYU fanbase, the national media was not high on them at all. With the 2024 college football season fastly approaching, ESPN's FPI came out with their predictions, and according to them, the projected record for the Cougars would come between 4.8 and 7.2 wins. That was the same that Vegas said. They'd only be favored in 3 of their 12 games, and they would have a 35% chance to get to a bowl game. Many predicted they could probably get to 6 wins, but it would be an absolute dogfight. Before the season, everyone said that BYU was not going to be any good. The same people who had picked Utah, K-State, Oklahoma State, and Arizona to be the top of the Big 12 said that BYU would finish 13th, as that is where they would finish in the preseason poll. BYU head coach Solani Sitake said for months that he saw a lot of good coming from this team and that he was very encouraged for the 2024 season, but nobody really listened to him, to be honest, and honestly there really wasn't a reason to. BYU is going completely under the radar, and there was just no logical reason or any good reason to think that BYU would be good this year. But everything changed once we got on the field. It has been quite the season for BYU. In week 1, they'd end up playing a terrible Southern Illinois team, and they would win that game by a ton, 41-13. In week 2, they'd play on the Friday night, and they go on the road to play against SMU. This game was pretty epic, as Preston Stone ended up getting benched, and SMU had an opportunity to go down and win, but Jennings could not make it happen, and BYU would survive 18-15, and this win looks a lot better in retrospect. In week 3, a game that many thought would be a trap game against Wyoming ended up being an easy win, as they won 34-14, and Wyoming is in a dark spot. So right now, BYU is 3-0, and people were giving them credit for the SMU win, but still, no one really thought BYU was anything special. In week 4, K-State would end up coming to Provo, and this game showed their legitimacy. Avery Johnson was completely rattled, and the number 13 Wildcats got skull-crushed 38-9, and Lavelle Edwards Stadium was absolutely rocking. BYU was now 4-0. After that, they go on the road to play against Baylor, and in that game, they would end up surviving by 1 score. They would beat the Bears 34-28, and all of a sudden, many were starting to wonder if this team was actually good enough to maybe make the playoff. After that, they'd face off with one of the preseason Big 12 favorites in Arizona, and this was one of their most dominant victories yet. They ended up winning that game 41-19, and then they were faced with a very difficult situation. Oklahoma State had gotten off to an 0-3 start in the conference, but in Lavelle Edwards Stadium, they were up. Jake Retzlaff would end up leading them down the field, and with 73 seconds left, would lead them 75 yards and eventually found Darius Lassiter for a 35-yard touchdown with just over 10 seconds to play. This play sent the stadium into an absolute frenzy and is the most iconic play of BYU's season so far. This past weekend, they traveled to UCF, and even though they were 7-0, they were not favored. They ended up shutting down UCF's ground game, and UCF would have 2 late touchdowns, but at one point BYU had a 24-point lead in the fourth quarter, and they would survive this one 37-24, and currently, the Cougars are 8-0 with a 5-0 mark in the Big 12. Statistically, BYU's gotten a lot from everybody. Jake Retzlaff has 1,800 yards with 18 touchdowns. LJ Martin has run for 357 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Retzlaff has also been a factor on the ground there. In terms of receiving, Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts both have 31 catches for nearly 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. And on the defensive side of the ball, Harrison Taggart leads the way with 49 tackles. Jack Kelly has 4 sacks. Mark Collins has 5 pass deflections, and Isaiah Glasker leads the way with 2 interceptions. BYU is currently ranked number 9 in the country, number 1 in the Big 12 with Iowa State, and they just have 4 more games remaining on their schedule. They're currently on bye, but they will get an opportunity to travel on the road to play against Utah here soon. Utah's had a disappointing season so far, but this is going to be one of the most hyped up games ever. This is an arch rivalry, and Utah is going to be looking to spoil BYU's perfect season, and ultimately I don't think it's going to happen. Even though Zach Wilson's little brother will be starting for the Utes, I think BYU is going to pull this one out, and I think they win all 4 of the rest of their games. They play Kansas at home, which has struggled mightily, then they get Arizona State on the road, but they still have a banged up quarterback in Sam Leavitt, and then finally they close off with the second worst team in the Big 12, the Houston Cougars. Those last 4 games aren't terribly difficult for them, and while that Utah game is going to be very tough, I do think BYU at least goes 11-1 and gets a chance to go to the Big 12 championship. Now, if they win that, they obviously get in the playoff, but if they lose that, they'd be sweating come selection day. BYU's rise has been absolutely crazy. In 100 years of Cougar football, only 5 teams have started 8-0. According to ESPN, BYU is the second football team since 1990 to start 8-0 while being an underdog in at least 4 games. Jake Retzlaff, who is the worst-rated quarterback in the Big 12 preseason polls, has become a confident game manager and a perfect leader for a well-balanced offense. LJ Martin has proven that he's one of the best running backs in the conference. They have 2 extremely good receivers, and Jay Hill's defense has totally flipped the switch from last year, becoming an extremely disciplined and talented unit, and they just have a tremendous culture. This stems from good coaching. Good coaching leads to higher levels of execution, fewer mistakes, penalties, and frustration, and good coaches are able to rally and get their teams going for any moment. BYU also heard crap all offseason about how they were terrible, how they lost 5 straight games, and were picked to finish near the bottom, so that is definitely what is helping fuel their perfect season. LaVell Edwards Stadium is also the highest capacity in the conference, and winning there is pretty much impossible. BYU has definitely been rewarded for its patience with Kalani Sitake, as he went 27-25 in his first 4 years, but they had that explosion in 2020 and 2021, and it seems like after a down year last year, BYU has totally started to figure it out. Right now, them and Iowa State are the 2 darlings from the Big 12, but I would say that BYU has a much more impressive resume. Wins against SMU and K-State are starting to look a lot better each and every week, and beating 4 other Power 5 opponents is also really solid. I think that Utah game is the toughest game on their schedule, and I think they're going to win, but I would not be surprised if they get upset. But either way, we all know BYU is going to fight, and they're going to get an opportunity to go to the playoff if they can just win out or even lose 1 game. I definitely would not have thought that, as they were picked to finish 13th, and I honestly had them even lower than that. I was dead wrong about BYU, and it seems like all of college football was. They've been one of the best stories this year, and I can't wait to see how they finish. But what do you guys think? If you're a BYU fan, how has this team gotten so good? What has made them so good? And how do you think they're going to finish the rest of the season? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video. Let me know what player I should cover next. Check out the sponsor of today's video, Mando. Also check out my video on the rise of Iowa State. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.